half boy, half god, all hero. You're listening to Ranking Rick Riordan, a podcast where we rank all 21 books in the Percy Jackson mythological universe, aka the Riordanverse. I'm Dan.
I'm Olga.
And I'm Clara. And today we're discussing Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Book 5, The Last Olympian.
Yes, this is part 2, and before we get back into our recap, we are going to have a bit of housekeeping. So if you didn't hear, we are moving the podcast to Tuesdays. It used to be Thursdays. Now it's Tuesdays. Woo! Also, look out for our incoming Sea of Monsters reaction video over on youtube.com/DoingOK. That will probably take the place of 1 week's podcast. It's going to be a time.
Mm-hmm.
So excited.
It's going to take time off of our lives, that's for sure.
Also, please send feedback to our podcast feedback@gmail.com. Leave us a comment down below the YouTube video. Also, thank you to, okay, can you read this for me?
Yeah, and JDBSVV682 and Livy
for their very kind reviews. Let's get back into the recap.
We pick up after Annabeth was stabbed and the crew regroups at a hotel. Selena says she'll head back to camp to try to convince Clarice to change her mind. Annabeth is pretty hurt, but will ultimately be okay. Percy rests and dreams of Nico receiving a vision of his past.
I dream of Nico a lot too.
Clara has no comment.
Oh, wait, can I say happy belated birthday to Nico? Because that was at some point, and
That's
I texted
true.
you guys about it. And so, yeah, it was
Yeah.
just his birthday recently.
I think I saw on
Congratulations.
Twitter it trending because now that we
Yeah.
do this podcast, I get that recommended
Yep.
to me. In the vision, Hades wants to take Maria, Nico's mother, and the kids to the underworld where they will be safe. Maria wants her kids to have a normal life, but Zeus has demanded that Hades hand them over. Zeus then makes their hotel explode, killing Maria, though the lives he wanted to claim were Nico's and Bianca's. Hades sends for Alecto and orders her to wash the D'Angelo's memories clean in the River Lethe and to take them to the Lotus Hotel where Zeus cannot harm them. The Oracle approaches Hades to tell him, "I told you so," and Hades curses the spirit of the Oracle, declaring that it will never find another human host until he and his children are welcomed in Olympus.
Want my satisfaction. That's what he said. That's what he said right there.
Okay.
All
I
right,
broke
well-
you guys' brains, apparently. Okay.
That's not the voice I have pictured for Hades.
But I guess, yeah, you do you.
Okay. Clara, what do you think of this whole thing?
So, like, this is why Zeus sucks, huh?
Yeah, for real.
And so there are many reasons why Zeus sucks, but this is a big one. That's one thing I have to say about it. Also, just this is why the gods suck.
Mhm.
And I fully appreciate that Rick is putting this in here so that we can have a way more nuanced understanding of the relationship between men and gods,
Yeah.
people and gods, I should say. But boy, it makes it hard to be sympathetic to, like, let's protect Olympus,
Yeah.
but like in a good way,
Yeah.
but also
Yeah.
oof.
Well, I mean, I always wondered if ultimately Riordan would, whether we'd actually ever make the gods like the enemy or not. And I mean, I haven't finished the book, so I don't really know.
The thing is that everyone is fallible, and you really feel it in this scene.
Mhm.
Like, Zeus is not right to strike this hotel down.
Yep.
And to want
He's
to
wrong.
Yeah,
Yep.
no, he's straight up wrong. Yes, fair enough. But at the same time, the reason he does it is because they're coming off of World War II, where Hades' children have, decimated the planet.
Mhm.
Can we, like, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
What are we supposed to make of this? Like,
Yeah.
what? So like, the D'Angelos are Italian, so he's like, it could be Mussolini, maybe. Like, is
Mhm.
that what they're trying? They're like, it wasn't Hitler, but it was still
No, I'm
Mussolini.
pretty sure
I'm
he-
pretty
I'm
sure
supposed to-
Hitler-
Is it Stalin?
I'm pretty sure he's both.
Is it? It's both?
I mean, where are Ares kids and all of this? Like,
Yeah. It's a mess.
yeah.
I think, all right, so I'll say there's a lot of, this is not the only example of, like, taking historical figures and bending them to fit the mythology of your series.
Yeah.
I think one of the examples off the top of my head was in Grimm, where they basically like create a species of monster that's very like charismatic, and the main character sees like historical footage of Hitler and he's like, oh my God, he was one of those creatures. And it's like, in a way that takes off some of the burden off of the horrors of humanity by making it be like, oh, you're of this personality, that's your godly parent, that is your nature, when in reality the whole thing is, no, people, regular humans, are capable of evil, and it's there's no point in like, you know, softening that blow and making it seem like it's something else. However, this is still targeted towards children, or at least young adults, and, you know, it is immersive to not necessarily blame it, but to be like, oh, see, this is the scope of this world.
I would argue, though, that this is actually better than what you're describing from Grimm, because they're still humans, and actually, like, you're supposed to see his kids as worse than him here. You know, like he's not, like, yes, there's senses of Hitler or whatever in him, but like he is supposed to be mostly misunderstood. And he's like, oh yeah, my kids, they got a little carried away there. Like, you know,
right.
But like, then you get to the thing of like, then you follow that. I mean, and I don't think people would, right? We're just critiquing it because we're thinking about it.
Yeah.
But like, then you get into this thing of like, oh, but was Hitler misunderstood? No. Like, let's make that very clear.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it does. I feel like it's just messy. There was also, I don't remember whether it was George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or both, was like a child of someone.
Athena, George Washington.
Athena. And it's like that also, like, you get into just like when you mess around with historical figures and make them into heroes, it's not going to end well. I think we're starting to sort of see a trend away from that.
Well, then there's also like,
bad, but
once Apollo is your main character, then you have to talk about stuff like slavery, and that like he was around back then, and he's like, I was never for slavery. And I think there actually is some myth that like sort of sticks up for that, but to a certain degree, like, we have to make them squeakier cleaner than they probably would have been if they were back. Like, you know, like, he was the one person who back then who didn't like
the one god who was not a fan of that. Yeah, I mean, that's the problem with holding in high regard the gods from the society that, yes, founded democracy, but at the same time enslaved millions of people. And, you know, it's not without, like, the Greek and Roman empires were not like, you know, are not beyond criticism, and we're definitely making them like child friendly.
So they definitely criticize them more as time goes on, though. And I'd also say, I believe that the next book semi-retcons the World War II stuff slightly.
I sort of remember that too, because I remember reading, as I was rereading them this time, I was like, oh, they really went all in on this, huh? I don't know. I feel like there's something.
They definitely talk a lot more about the Civil War in the next book, but I believe they also mention a little bit of different things in World War II. But
well, taking this scene for what it is, it's like Zeus has always been like arrogant and like stubborn and brash, and that is wrong. But it tracks why he would do this. Hades is his like counterpart, but also adding a chip on his shoulder. And so like they're both wrong. They're both like influenced by the knowledge of the prophecy. The oracle can't help but speak it. It's just like everyone is victimizing everyone else. And also has their reasons, but just because they have their reasons, that doesn't make them just. And, you know, I think this definitely isn't a sympathetic scene, but it is helpful for like spelling out Nico's backstory. And I think it fits very well into the overall plot and pace of this book.
Well, and it creates the cycle of violence as far as, it goes from Zeus killing Hades' family, the Hades cursing the Oracle, to the Oracle messing up Luke's life, to Luke becoming who he is, and then he breaks the cycle of violence. So like that being the climax of this pentology in a lot of ways is pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. So Percy's dreams shift to Rachel, who with difficulty convinces her dad to let her fly back to New York to tell Percy something life or death. The Titan Prometheus has come to negotiate at the hotel. He states that Olympus is destined to fall and that the demigods should surrender. Prometheus then gives Percy Pandora's Pythos, God, say that 5 times fast, containing the spirit of hope. He tells Percy that if and when they decide to surrender, he only needs to release hope and the Titan would know. Later, Percy gives Hestia the Pythos as he realizes that in order to resist the temptation to give up hope, he must leave it in the place where it survives best, the hearth.
All right. I want more Prometheus. I
too.
thought he was good in the scene, but man, I felt like he has like a scene. I wish we had more. But very cool to introduce that character. I like the way he's represented as far as like a businessman almost.
I love the characterization of Prometheus. I love not making him too good or too bad. He's a really interesting character, and we have a lot of interesting characterizations throughout. Like we just had this awesome, like, you know, Zeus sucks, Hades sucks, but also, you know, it makes sense. Prometheus is great, and I love I love Percy giving hope to Hestia. I really love that.
Does Riordan like hate Zeus? Like he's like the
Everyone should.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like he's the one character that he really does not give any like complexity to. Like he just kind of sucks, and he's stupid. Like half the time he doesn't do what he should do, and it just makes things harder for everybody.
I think that's
And,
Zeus
like,
in a nutshell, though.
I mean, I'm just surprised that like even with the myths, I would have thought that maybe you would try to like round him out a little bit more, but he is who he is, I guess.
Yeah.
So I like mentioned Sarpedon last week, this son of Zeus, who Zeus really wants to save, and but he can't because he's constrained and because he's the king of the gods, so he cannot do things that maybe other gods would be willing to be like, well, no, bend the rules. But Zeus cannot do it because the laws are from him. So he's constrained in a way that others aren't. They sort of give that storyline of a godly parent trying to do whatever for their child. They sort of divvy that up.
Yeah.
But the problem is Thalia exists, so Zeus already broke his own rules in this series.
Yeah, well, he made her into a tree.
Yeah, and I think he actually does something similar to Sarpedon. Like he like they die, but like he can't just like, you know,
let him go completely. Yeah.
And I get that like Zeus and Hera are they have the most power, so they deserve the most critique. But also we don't get any attempt to like look into their motives and stuff here. We just don't.
All right, moving on.
Yeah. Percy dreams of Kronos, who is conversing with Ethan Nakamura. Ethan is reluctant to tell Kronos about Percy's weak point. The battle starts anew, and Percy faces off with the Titan Hyperion. Percy creates a small hurricane to douse Hyperion's fiery aura, and Grover and his friends then successfully trap him inside a maple tree.
Yeah, big fight. Love the hurricane thing.
Really unexpected.
You know, I talked last time about power levels, but if I can let that go, I do like that all the nature spirits work together for it too, and that they trap him. They don't like kill him or any of that, whatever.
Yeah, it was unexpected, probably because it was a bit too much, like you said. But I mean, yeah, it makes sense that, I mean, Percy can do this now that he is embodied by the spirit, you know, with his immortality. I don't think he might have even like survived trying to call upon all this power, access it before he became like near immortal.
We'll see.
That's my pet theory that might be contradicted in future books that Dan knows about. All right. Almost immediately, a flying pig descends and wreaks havoc.
Obviously.
Yeah. Percy and Blackjack chase it and then activate some automatons to destroy the sow. The battle rages on, and it's not looking great for the campers. Luckily, they are saved by Chiron's cousins, the party ponies.
Woo!
The Titan army. The Titan army flees to regroup.
All right, let's pause there.
Yep.
Olga, I know you had opinions about the flying pig.
All right, listen, we come off of this really badass like battle. And then we can't get too far into the seriousness of casualties and power and no, there's got to be a freaking flying pig to like, ha ha ha, it's so funny. It's the comedy, it's the lightheartedness. Like, seriously, after a Titan, you're going to back that up with a flying giant pig. Like,
Well,
the scope of this is ridiculous.
I think the bigger problem isn't just that it's silly, it's also that then they try to make it sound like the pig is a bigger threat than the Titan
Yeah,
was.
that's what I'm trying to say. Is I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, Titan turns into a tree. Pig, oh God, we're destroying the city, chasing it down.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell?
I think they should
Yeah.
just flip them.
Yeah, if they had flipped them, it would have been fine and good, and also might have even helped with some of the power level thing. Like,
Yeah.
I think that really does put it in sort of like some sort of stark focus
Yeah.
for me, where it's like, Titan, snap your finger, that's done. This pig must be the most powerful thing. Like, what is it?
And then he gets like pummeled to death by some robots.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the other thing that bothered me that I think I mentioned last week of like, oh, we're going and activating all the automaton statues in the city.
Mm.
And then Percy's like, oh, but not all of them got activated. I'm
Yeah.
like, you did that yesterday. Like, why?
Yeah.
God.
Why not?
All right. So moving on from party ponies and statues, Mr. D transports Percy to a party where he's healing from a typhon wound and playing Pac-Man. He warns Percy not to lose Olympus, for it would be the end of Western civilization. He also asks Percy to keep his son safe and then teleports him back to New York. Aww.
I think this is my favorite Mr. D scene, bar none. No pun intended.
Oh my God.
Him playing Pac-Man and yelling at Blinky and, caring about his son and, sort of making fun of Percy while also like clearly trusting him enough to take care of his son. And then him actually being grateful later in the book.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good comedy, good characterization and all that.
I think Mr. D has the best gradual development of like almost any other god except Hermes.
Yeah.
Even Hermes, I wouldn't call it gradual development. It's just kind of like here and then there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all mostly in just one book.
Yep.
So I love this scene too. I do just want to say that I remember when we were first reading Lightning Thief, I said, I wonder like how this whole thing about what we're doing is defending Western civilization. Like, how will this play out? And I highlighted this quote that Mr. D says, because I do think it is a problem. It's not a Mr. D problem. It's a like the series at this point in it problem. Yes, your entire society will dissolve. Perhaps not right away, but mark my words, the chaos of the Titans will mean the end of Western civilization. Art, law, wine tastings, music, video games, silk shirts, black velvet paintings, all the things that make life worth living will disappear. So some of these things are funny. It's like black velvet paintings, sure. But the idea that art and law and music are Western civilization, that's a problem.
Yeah.
I just want to throw that out there, that specific quote as well, because I know that like things are going to start changing when we get into the next book series. But this is a problem for the series that's not okay. That's not good.
Yeah, because I'm okay with the general idea of that we're tied to Western civilization, and it's still, no matter what, obviously it's bad if all of the United States gets blown up. Like, he's not saying the whole world will die without us or anything. But yeah, going into the specifics, once you start saying that stuff, that's not great.
Yeah. Also, just the concept of Western civilization has been used by like white supremacists, especially in like online groups, especially recently, as a sort of like cudgel. I mean, it always has been, but because there's no such thing as Western civilization, it's a made up, it's a concept that's designed to, Western civilization is separate from these other civilizations that are inferior. So just really want to call that out so that no one ever feels like saying things like that again.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And the problem is that like, the second I apply any real thought to it, I'm like, oh yeah, this makes no sense to associate like lawlessness and like the lack of art and beauty with like the rest of the world. Just because the seat of Olympus is in New York. Again, this is this like American supremacy of America is the most important country in the world. Look at our influence. Isn't it great? It is not something that in the regular world that I would agree with, but for whatever reason in this book, I'm like, oh yeah.
I don't even know that. I mean, I would at least say I don't know that it's arguing that for American supremacy as much as it's saying it's giving all of the credit for every sort of intelligent thought to the Greeks is the main thing.
Or Western civilization,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
so for me, it would be better if they said the effects of the Greek civilization. That would still be really problematic.
Yeah.
But using the concept of Western civilization it's the same sort of construct as whiteness, where it's this imaginary thing. Like that doesn't exist. People didn't have a concept that the French and the English weren't like, well, we're Western civilization, like back in the 16th century or whatever, right? I mean, maybe they were, I don't know, whenever it started happening, but like it's this made up thing to distinguish themselves from the lazy, lawless.
Yeah, it's part of Orientalism.
It's Orientalism, it's racism in a lot of ways. It's
I hope one thing the TV show does is sort of comment on the fact that there are other gods early on in the show. Because they do he definitely does a much better job with that as these books go on. And when in Kane Chronicles, they basically mention, hey, there's other gods in like the first 5 chapters or whatever, you know? Like, so like, I definitely think that is a good thing to like. Yes, these books are focused on this side of things, but make it clear we're not the end all be all. We're, you know, there's so much other things going on here. There's not just one sun god. There's 50 sun gods, and they all matter, and so does science. And that's something that they really go into a lot as books go on.
Yeah, it's a real shame that is not something that was taken in account here, because I can also, again, this kind of quote and this kind of way of thinking is a product of the time that this book was published. And I'd like to believe that, you know, we've moved on, even though, unfortunately, like you've said, Clara, this is still something that's prevalent and on the rise in these like white supremacist groups and pockets of the internet. But this is something that I'm concerned like kids are reading even now and are still taking away this message of the collapse of America, the collapse of us, so to speak, is an end of society as a whole.
There's some really great work. There's a book, but it's called Not All Dead White Men. And it's about like the intersection, like how classics gets used by like white men on the internet. And there's this really big problem in classics as a discipline in academia. Racism and sexism are incredibly pervasive in the study of classics. They have been historically so. And the like Western civilization argument, like that is something that happens. Like you see it with arguments that are for Brexit. You see it with it is so foundational to a lot of the racist things we see today. And so even a book like this, which, you know, this is not his intention. This is not Rick's intention. And I think he does do a lot to go forward. I think, Olga, that point, like kids are still reading this. And this is exactly that sort of thing that plants the idea in your head that like Western civilization is better than other civilizations, that I come from a better group, that I, you know, and that if it disappears because of some threat of invasion, the whole world will collapse. So I need to protect it, is like a narrative that can be co-opted by really dangerous people.
And something I wanted to say, because earlier you were saying you think it's a sign of the time the book was written in. I don't know that I agree with that. I think it's a sign of where Rick was in his like development as an individual in some ways. I think that he learned a lot since writing this, and I think that he took a lot of criticism and incorporated it. I think that's very clear as you see the progression of his diversity, his female characters, his, you know, world building. As much as we want to say, I don't think we've changed that much since whatever this was, like 2009 or whatever.
Right.
Like, and if anything, we might have gotten worse, like we we're talking about. So I think that he's learned a lot, and I think that's really nice to see an author progressing in the right direction as opposed to the opposite.
But then, at what point, frankly, do you need to like publish a new version of your past work? Like, especially now when, you know, this is being developed into a TV series. You have, you know, more books coming out that are in tangential universes from, you know, the Rick Riordan Presents books. You know, you're still getting new readers. You're still like developing this franchise, so to speak. You know.
Well, that's kind of why I brought up the TV show. That's a chance to sort of rewrite some of your past mistakes or whatever.
Right. So you don't say this specific line of dialogue, you edit that. But the book, it's in print. You know, authors go back and release new versions. I'm just saying that, I'm not saying that like I'm angry at him for not doing that yet, but this is like one of those things that is harmful and that I just like completely didn't notice.
Yeah.
And I'm like ashamed of myself for not noticing that. And that's the seed has already unfortunately been planted to like ignore this kind of thing.
Totally.
On the flip side of this, I mean, I'm pretty sure we all read an article that was basically arguing that the TV show shouldn't basically bring up the idea of Western civilization at all and should from the very beginning include gods from all over the place. To me, that's a step too far as yes, you can talk about them, but you shouldn't fundamentally change the entire story, which if you had gods from every civilization from the beginning, that just isn't the same book.
Right.
But that's my opinion.
Yeah.
I understand where other people are coming from, but
yeah.
I think we can talk about the Greek gods. I think we can talk and then also talk about other gods. But I think the idea of defending Western civilization isn't something.
How do you describe why the gods are in America?
I mean, we have Greek shit all over the place. We're praying to them in a way. I mean, by molding our system of government off of them, by building temples. We build temples. We designed our buildings to look like green temples. We're weird. I think you can actually make a sort of more interesting comment about like DC and American governance, and
they do a lot of that in King Chronicles. Actually, I had no idea how many like pyramids and things were in America. There's lots of different things. Obviously, there's the Washington Monument, which is an obelisk and stuff like that.
I think that you can make the argument of like they go wherever. Like wherever they are worshipped, wherever the beliefs that they that they set up are held up, praised and held up. And that is the thing where if they're able to, you know, include some criticism of that and be like, the Greek society was fallible, the United States is fallible.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and if they make the scope of like, if Olympus collapses, then I don't know. How are they going to say the United States collapse? Like, because you don't want to say like society collapses because that's there are too many societies. That is too broad a term.
I don't think it needs to be the world ends. I think it can be the U.S. ends, and that's still a big high stakes thing.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it's actually kind of similar to the way like superhero movies actually like, you have different superheroes that kind of live in different areas and have their like territories and domains, and sometimes they call in backup, but usually, you know,
each person's in their own little pod.
Exactly. And his like the collapse of their specific city or town is like the most important thing ever, and they're not going to call in like, you know, Superman from wherever to help them out.
Yeah, because he's already busy in space doing blah blah blah.
Yeah. So I'm sure you could use that same logic, and I don't think people will blink too much at the lack of generalization.
Yeah, it is. I can't wait for you guys to read King Chronicles and let's talk about that.
That's several
stuff.
series away, Daniel.
I know. One last thing I wanted to add is I do think it would be good to straight up say in the show or something like that, that the gods, like the areas they live in, are very imperfect and have a lot of problems. They make great stuff, but they also create a lot of pain and are arrogant. And I think drawing the comparisons between America's goodness and badness and the gods' goodness and badness, I actually think could be really interesting.
So they shouldn't wait until like the equivalent of book 3, basically, to get into that. They should kind of do it off the bat in Lightning Thief.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like that's the sort of thing, they're not going to do this, but if there was some carefully worded thing, I feel like it should be an intro, like to every single episode, you know, like the same way there's the Avatar, you know, like.
But I mean, so I also want to mention, Clara, I don't know how much you know about the Rick Riordan Presents label. Do you know anything about that?
I know it exists and I know a little bit about it. I was trying not to read too much because I don't know what we're going to cover here. Well,
so, I mean, I feel like eventually we might get to some of those. But to me, that also shows Riordan's development as a person, that he's not like, okay, I'm going to go write some Chinese mythology because I'm white and can write about whatever I want to write about. The fact that he is like, you know what, we need to include these other mythologies in my brand, but I'm not the one to tell that story. I think that that shows a lot of I don't know, emotional intelligence and whatever.
It's a person who is like, I want to use my name to share this and empower other people who won't have the same opportunities to like get a franchise or get their voices out there. And that's like the ideal in like using your power in your place. And they've done like India, I want to say India, China, maybe some Native American stuff. I don't remember all of them. Some of them aren't out yet, by my understanding too. But and that's very good of him. And you're absolutely right. Like, we're not gonna. This isn't ranking Rick Riordan. Rick is at the bottom of the list. You know?
No. I think he seems to me to be someone with very good intentions and someone who is increasingly aware and like in a good way, like at a level which I say like, ooh, wow, of understanding power and his own power and the power of others, and also the power of the stories that he's telling, because myths survive to this day because of how powerful they are. And so any retelling of these myths like necessarily has that really that they have a lot of power. And so the fact that he's thinking and trying to be purposeful about that is great. I think he was less so in these first few books. And I think he's come a long way since then. And I agree. I wish there could be some sort of new edition, even if it had a foreword. I don't know, something about where he's come as and where he's gone as a person and a writer.
All right.
Well,
back
that was
recap.
that was a hell of a tangent.
We're like
but
35
I think it was
minutes in now.
I think it was good, but I'm sorry if we lost anyone. All right. So Rachel arrives in a crashing helicopter, but Annabeth manages to get inside the cockpit and steer it to safety on the ground.
Annabeth.
Girl power. Woo. Rachel tells Percy that she has seen the future and he is not the hero. They face off with a Draken.
No, it's a Draken.
With a K. Even though Rachel says the child of Ares is destined to defeat it. Surprisingly, Clarice arrives in a boar helmet, leading her cabin into battle. However, after Clarice is attacked by the Draken and falls from her chariot, they realize something is wrong. The real Clarice soon arrives, and they all recognize the fake Clarice as Selena Beauregard. Selena reveals herself as the spy. She explains that before she met Beckendorf, Luke was very kind to her. When she wanted to stop helping him, he threatened and blackmailed her. Selena then passes away. Out of anger, Clarice single-handedly kills the Draken.
All right. Lots to talk about. Clara, you have thoughts?
So this is Achilles and Patroclus. Patroclus disguises himself as Achilles to get the men that Achilles fights with to go out and fight. And he does good, but then he dies. And Achilles realizes what has happened. He's so upset to see Patroclus dead that he's just like crazy killer, kills very important people. Anyway, Achilles and Patroclus were deeply, deeply in love, and I will not hear any opinions to the contrary. So therefore, extrapolating, Clarice and Selena also had a thing.
Okay.
I buy that.
That's my thoughts.
Yeah.
Cool. I really like Selena's story. I wish Clarice got a little bit more of an epilogue in this story personally, because it's kind of her fault. And like, yes, she feels bad about it, but I feel like giving Clarice a little bit more time to breathe in that would have been nice. But obviously, great seeing her enraged and killing the Draken and all that.
Yeah. This was a heartbreaking scene, but again, it was like very exciting to read, even though I was like, oh yeah, that's obviously Selena. But Clarice is going to come in here and like kick some ass, but is Selena going to survive? You know, that was a question that I wasn't like 100% sure of. I would love to see a short story about Selena's side of the whole spy situation and her being stuck between Luke and Beckendorf. The battle continues, and later the group sees Grover kneeling over dying Linnaeus. After Linnaeus is reincarnated into a laurel, Grover accompanies Percy and Annabeth to plant Linnaeus in the gardens of Olympus. Rachel breaks up with Percy and says, "It's not you, it's fate."
Let's stop there.
Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, this is going to kind of carry into later when Annabeth is like, "I never liked you, Luke." One of my biggest issues with this book is that they Riordan apparently felt the need to be like, none of the other relationships actually were a thing. Annabeth and Percy can accuse each other without the other people having to be like, actually, I never had feelings for you. That to me is a little goofy.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
Yeah. It's a teen true love thing that I think actually isn't necessarily helpful for teens to hear or see of the sort of like the person you love is the person you've always loved and the only person you will ever love. And so therefore, if you thought you had feelings for anyone else, you were wrong. Instead of like, love and feelings are complicated.
Yeah, especially with Annabeth, I'm like, girl, you know if you feel like someone's a brother or not. Like that's not something that you just like you realize. Like
maybe more of a step brother. Gross.
Oh.
Gross, but yeah. Yeah, so no one's too heartbroken, and it's okay. Percy climbs onto Poseidon's throne, where he is able to telepathically communicate with his father. He succeeds in convincing Poseidon to leave his palace behind and fight for Olympus instead. This is weird, if you ask me.
Okay.
Like I like that, but how is it that Poseidon didn't understand this?
That's an interesting thing. I mean, I don't know if it's that he didn't understand it. I think the idea is that it's his home and he didn't want to give up his home and that he was fighting for his home and that it was a sacrifice for him to leave it behind. But Percy convinced him. And I mean, they're very like prideful and stubborn.
Right. I guess they did set up Poseidon starting the fights with the old sea gods like far, far earlier than the rest of this.
Yeah.
But
and also he was so focused on it, he might not have realized quite how bad things had gotten.
Yeah, I think that's I can buy that. I just know for some reason this gave me pause. Like I think it was supposed to be like, oh, it's a big deal that Poseidon is leaving this behind, and I guess I just wasn't. Even from Percy visiting it at the beginning of this book, I didn't really feel the weight of that as much as I felt the weight of Typhon.
Yeah. Again, a lot of stuff you just gotta like let go a little bit, but like if he was being that like aged and hurt by his temple being attacked, then you would argue that if it was destroyed, he would be way, way worse. So like, I'm like, I understand that their reasoning is actually that's not the center of your power. The center of your power is Olympus. But like, how does that jive with the fact that he was getting old and weak?
Right.
Yeah. I was gonna try to say a similar thing to you, Dan, and had a similar sort of like is this another thing about like the Last Olympian, like this theme of like, but your hearth and where your family is and your home. So like maybe that's the seat of Poseidon's individual power, but his real power comes from his family and his home writ large more than just himself.
I think that's the argument they have for both him and for Hades, where it's like, okay, yeah, you could maybe defend the underworld, but like whether you like it or not, Olympus is also your seat of power. Whether they're giving you a literal seat there or not, they're your family. I think that's what also gets Hades to come.
Sucks for you know what, Zeus just sucks so much. Why didn't he stay behind? It's his seat of power. Like, I know the others are staying behind in their seats of power, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna go fly around. Like, and good for you, Zeus, but also think through it. Whatever.
Yeah. All right. Let's not break our brains too much over this, I guess. All right. Kronos takes out Chiron as he arrives at the doors of the Empire State Building. Hades appears along with Persephone, Demeter, and Nico and a massive undead army. How convenient. They're already dead. Kronos creates a magical barrier that cuts him off from the rest of the battle. Only Percy, Thalia, Annabeth, and Grover are left within the boundaries. As Percy's group fights off Kronos' vanguard, Kronos, along with Ethan, makes his way up to Olympus, where he starts to obliterate it. Thalia is incapacitated when a statue of Hera falls on her. Lol.
I'm not going to say anything.
I know, which is the real reason I'm laughing, not because she gets fallen on, but because you're like seething here. Something you left off here is the wonderful Sally and Paul fighting thing.
Yeah.
I was just trying to make it a quick recap.
I know, but it was so great.
Yeah, it was nice. Also, it's because we mentioned Chiron getting attacked. It's kind of I like the going against the trope that the fact that the mentor character actually made it all the way through the series.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
Yeah.
Maybe
good for him.
I wonder why he decided. I don't know how big and important Chiron is for the rest of.
I think it was probably just not wanting to fall into the trope, and we've killed enough people.
That's
you know,
true.
like we killed Linnaeus, the greatest mentor of all.
Oh my God. Okay. Character with so much development.
we loved him so much.
I wanted to pet your soft, fuzzy belly. All right. The final battle begins in the throne room. Percy convinces Ethan to fight on their side, but Kronos kills Ethan and manages to incapacitate the three campers. Confident of his triumph, Kronos then shows them a vision of the Typhon, who, by now, has reached the Hudson River. Suddenly, Poseidon appears, and the gods strike with renewed force. They manage to send Typhon back to Tartarus, and Kronos destroys the vision in anger.
Yay.
Yeah, nice.
Good action.
Annabeth tries calling out to Luke and is tossed across the throne room in return. Annabeth, now seriously hurt, tries one last time to bring Luke out by reminding him of his promise to her, that they would always be a family. The fact that he had hurt Annabeth spurs Luke to regain control of his body. Luke struggles to keep control and tells Percy that in order to defeat Kronos, he must be slain by his own hand, as Kronos would regain control if anyone else approaches him aggressively. Percy picks up Annabeth's knife, and though he initially plans to kill Luke himself, he relents and hands it over. Luke then stabs himself in his own weak spot. Because of his sacrifice, the Titan Lord is defeated. Luke asks Annabeth if she loved him, but she says, only as a brother, dude.
I miss Luke.
No.
He's a
I
good
already
boy.
miss Luke.
He's a good bad boy.
Yeah, he's that very, very, very good villain who's not totally a villain. He's like the epitome of that trope, and I love it.
Yeah.
I love that trope, and I love him.
Yeah. And I mean, okay, I'll kind of go slightly against what I was saying about like you should know whether he's your brother or not. I mean, I understand the whole thing of we're a family and that was, I guess you could argue that Percy was misreading it the whole time and that she just really cared about him and she never like had feelings for him. But when you don't really get inside Annabeth's head, it certainly feels like he had romantic feelings for him.
She was blushing a lot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yep.
A whole lot of blushing. Too much blushing, if you ask me. No. Romance aside, I do like this scene a lot. I will miss Luke, but at the same time, I'm kind of okay with his with his sacrifice.
Oh,
like
yeah.
I'm okay with this being like the course of the story. The villain, the antagonist redeems himself in defeating the actual villain. And again, for like a young adult reader, I think this is a really good example of this kind of story.
Yeah, and I think this is a great little arc for Percy throughout this book and sort of throughout all of the books. But yeah, him finally being like, okay, Annabeth was right. I should hand this over to Luke. Luke is ultimately not all evil. Is the great way to end that out.
Yeah. Oh, and also Ethan, just like a good boy.
Yeah, a good boy.
Yeah, I wish he had accomplished something more significant
than not spilling the secret.
Yeah, but yeah.
But he did. But he
did the right thing in the end. We should get an Ethan Nakamura spin-off show.
Ooh, I'd watch it.
Yeah.
Don't kill him off. Just pull like a Boba Fett. Where it's like, oh yeah, he's dead, but he fell off Olympus and he actually survived because another Pegasus caught him.
What if a different god like gives him a blessing, or like Athena like blesses him because he didn't like kill Annabeth, or Poseidon does because he didn't kill Percy. They could have. Yeah, Ethan's alive. 2021.
Yeah.
All right. So in honor of their victory, the gods bestow the group with fabulous prizes.
Woo!
They make Tyson a general of the Cyclops and present him with the best stick in all the land. Oh
my God.
Yeah. I mean, a little bit of comic relief. Dan, enough.
Keep it going.
He's going to listen to you, Clara, not me.
Go ahead.
All right. They instate Annabeth as the official architect for the redesign of Olympus. They award Grover the empty seat on the Council of Cloven Elders. All good. All
He's
good.
a lord of the wild now.
Yes.
And Juniper thinks that's pretty great.
I mean, who
Lord
wouldn't?
of the wild.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Lastly, the gods offer Percy immortality, but Percy declines, instead asking for a different wish. He asks them to claim all demigods they have sired as soon as they reach 13 or as soon as they have reached camp. He also asks that Hades and the minor gods be respected and given a cabin for their children at camp. Plus, Percy asks for the Big Three pact to be broken, saying the pact didn't work. Because the gods swore on the river Styx, they must oblige his wish, although some of them are uncomfortable with it. Yeah, that's lots of child support.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, I mean, this is also, a great ultimate ending for Percy, him, choosing what he really knows is for the good of his people more so than the good of him. And also romantic because he wants to be with Annabeth.
Yeah. Cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Good boy.
Yeah.
A good boy, a good hero, a good man.
So here's the problem that I find myself being like, what happened to my memory? I knew that this was the ending of the pentology.
Weird.
But I don't think I read this book, and I don't know if I why would I have Googled it? I don't know. Maybe it's one of those things where I was just like, oh, this is the logical ending for this story because the whole thing is about, these demigod children not being recognized. It's only the Olympians having the cabins.
Yeah.
So nice, wholesome ending was everyone is welcome at camp and no one is rejected.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
I just think it is very and no one was critical of them again.
Well, I mean, again, it's not the actual end of the story.
Yeah.
So, it's especially make note of the fact that he said to pardon Callisto. Or is that the right name? I always say
Calypso.
Calypso. Callisto is an X-Men.
Oh.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we'll be back to that.
Another love triangle. I see it on the horizon. And then Calypso's like, no, I only ever saw Percy as a brother.
That'll be great.
Percy runs into Hermes later, and they have a sad talk about Luke and how Hermes knew his fate but could not interfere. Back at camp, Rachel has chosen to take the spirit of the Oracle. Rachel is able to successfully become the new Oracle, and at that same day, she speaks her first prophecy.
The Prophecy of 7. That's what they call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Percy and Annabeth decide to make their relationship Facebook official and have a dope underwater makeout sesh. Because the gods uphold their promise, new demigods keep appearing in many different places. Cabins are also being built to the minor gods. Even with Rachel's prophecy bothering them, Percy and Annabeth are excited for the future.
Congratulations. We have reached the end of book 5. And now, unless anybody has anything to say, we shall rank Rick Riordan. Good?
Hooray.
Yeah.
All right, ranking Rick Riordan. We will begin with... Oh, hey, we have a feedback thing.
Oh, hey, look at that.
So Game Baron over on the YouTube said their rankings. Their favorite location was Manhattan. Their best god was Hades and Poseidon. Their best hero was Luke and Clarice. Will we agree? Let's find out. All right, starting out with best hero, our current rankings from worst to best are Clarice, Grover, Thalia, Tyson, Zoe, Nico, and Percy. I have nominated for this book Annabeth, Beckendorf, Selena, and Luke. Also, if you want to move any of the people we currently have in their ranking based on their success in this book, feel free. I will start the bidding at Annabeth. I think she deserves it.
Yes.
Yeah, Annabeth.
All right. Where do we want to put Annabeth? I'm going to say either before or after Nico.
I think after Nico.
Yeah.
After Nico, meaning
Between
it goes
Zoe and
Annabeth,
Nico.
Nico, Percy. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think so too.
Annabeth is third. Now, do we want to add any of these other people like Beckendorf, Selena? Or
I want to hold off on that. I want to move Clarice up.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
Clarice should be right after Annabeth.
I'm good with that.
All right, I'm good with that too. I also feel like Zoe's kind of high, given that she's only in one book.
Yep.
And we moved Tyson up too.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll put Zoe right above Thalia.
I think so.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now with
But that does make me a little sad though, because then Grover's last, and is that really fair to Grover?
yes.
Yeah.
All right, fine.
He still makes the list.
Yeah,
It's
all right,
not that
fine.
he's not on the
Yeah.
list.
All right.
It's just like, I mean, looking at the other characters,
Yeah.
we're
Do you think- you
with them
think-
in battle more.
You
like
think
they're-
Zoe is better than Grover? Because Grover, I feel
Yeah.
like, has actual development. Zoe's a
Hmm.
one-off character. That's the thing, is like when we added Zoe, we were like, she was really good in this book, but she's really like a guest star.
right?
So
But
like,
she's such a fun guest star. Look, speaking of spin-off shows, if Zoe had a show and it was a prequel and it was like 1920s New York City and it's Zoe and the Hunters of Artemis, like, would you not watch that
yeah,
show?
that would be cool. Do we want Beckendorf or Selena? I'm going to argue for Beckendorf and not for Selena or Luke, who I think are too gray area.
Luke is definitely too gray area for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Because he
Selena,
doesn't
I
really
feel
do
like-
it for the good of society. He does it because, like, I mean, he does, but it's also because of Annabeth.
He does too many
Yeah.
bad things to be
Yeah,
honest.
he's a baddie.
Yeah.
I'm gonna argue very
Yeah.
much for him there, but
Yeah.
not here.
Yeah.
All right, so after much deliberation, some of which I probably cut out because we went for so long, our new order is Beckendorf, Thalia, Tyson, Grover, Zoe, Clarice, Annabeth, Nico, and Percy. Very good list, in my opinion. I am happy Annabeth is here. Let's go to Best God. So our current list is Ares, Pan, Hades, Hermes, Hephaestus, I always say his name badly, and Artemis.
Mm-hmm.
And I have nominated Hestia, Poseidon, Mr. D, and Athena.
Mr. D on the list, absolutely 2021.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. And
Um,
Hestia should be there too.
Yeah, and honestly, Poseidon should be there. Let's just fill out our god list for the
Okay.
most part, right?
Should we?
uh,
Okay.
We don't need to add like Zeus and
No,
Hera.
fuck
Hera.
Zeus.
Yeah, but like these Poseidon needs to be on the list at this point.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start with Mr. D. Do we think he's number one?
No,
Where do we think he goes?
above Hephaestus.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Hermes needs to change.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so does Hades, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So let's actually just start from the top. Who do we
Okay.
think is the top god now? I would argue Hermes.
I would argue Hades, maybe? Hades or Hermes. I'm pretty okay with
Hades
either.
or Hermes. Yep, I would be okay with either.
All
Okay,
right,
let me think
so
about
that makes
this.
Olga
All
the
right.
deciding vote.
So Hermes is a jerk to Annabeth, but Hades is a jerk to everyone, and he cursed the Oracle way back when.
But they
he
both
hasn't-
have reasons for
They
why.
have reasons for why. So they're both motivated by tragedy. This is hard.
I think, to me, Hades and his jealousy, which is earned, and the fact that he is given this like bad job that nobody respects, even though it's so hard, and he has to deal with Persephone and her mom, and
That's true.
And he has good-
That's stressful for him.
he has good comedy, and he's like kind of a bad guy, but he ultimately, listens to Nico in this.
Yeah.
All
All right.
Yeah.
Hades is number one.
Hooray!
right. Hades followed by Hermes.
Then Artemis. I think Artemis should
I
stay
think so
number
too.
3.
Okay. Then Mr. D.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So our list for best god goes from worst to best: Ares, Pan, Athena, Hephaestus, Poseidon, Hestia, Mr. D, Artemis, Hermes, and Hades. I'm glad Hades is number one.
Yeah.
Me too. It's like the second. It's the second best that could happen since Nico is not number
Yeah.
one hero.
hmm
All right. Best baddie: Circe, Atlas, Kelly, Dr. Thorne, Medusa, Polyphemus, and King Minos. Now, the question is, do we separate Luke and Kronos?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Luke is clearly number one.
Yes.
Then maybe King Minos and then Ethan.
I don't know what to do with Ethan. Is he really?
He's pretty clearly like, yeah, he redeems himself at the end, but
I would say Minos and then Ethan and then Kronos.
yeah, that's how I feel too. I could see the argument for Kronos going higher. He's also the most like dangerous.
Let's switch Kronos and Ethan.
Okay.
Yeah.
King Minos is just more villainous
And
still
I just-
somehow. I don't know.
yeah.
Like he's just so good.
He also
King
'cause
Minos is just really good.
the fact that he's also like a human,
yeah.
I think
Yeah,
helps
it's
him.
good.
Yeah. All right, so that makes our list: Cersei, Atlas, Kelly, Dr. Thorne, Medusa, Polyphemus, Ethan, Kronos, King Minos, and Luke. Very good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now
Least controversial list so far.
well, the next one also will probably be not that controversial.
No, it won't.
Best real world locale. We have Alcatraz, St. Louis Arch, Hoover Dam, Smithsonian, and Clara gets added to the list. New York City at number one.
Yeah, actually, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. There's no
Yeah.
debating this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
no.
obviously
Yeah.
number one. All right, which brings us to the books, which we currently have ranked as Sea of Monsters, Lightning Thief, Titan's Curse, Battle of the Labyrinth, and Clara just wrote it in The Last Olympian.
I don't know if I agree with
I don't know if I agree with her
okay,
either.
Okay, all right,
All
okay,
right.
all right. Okay.
All right. Here's the thing. For me, on any given day, 3 through 5 could switch in order.
They have.
Yeah. I think I'd put it at number 1, but I'm not like hard set on that. What are your feelings, Olga?
I really liked Labyrinth.
Mhm.
I really enjoyed The Last Olympian. I did, but it served a lot of masters. I really like all of the action in it. It was
Yeah.
very well written. It was very exciting to read. I like couldn't put it down. But the inner workings of like the characters, I think, were better in Battle of the Labyrinth.
I think that's debatable. We really did not like Annabeth in Battle of the
that's
Labyrinth.
so true.
Also, I don't feel like Percy actually has nearly as much going on in that as he does in this.
Mhm.
Nico has a really good arc in Battle of the Labyrinth, but I would
He
argue
also
he's
has
like,
a good arc here.
Even better arc here. Well, no, look, all his arcs are great.
Yeah.
We can't really debate
Yeah.
which one is better because they're all fantastic.
I think I'm on Last Olympian being the best.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
I just need to think it out.
The way I feel about Last Olympian is versus Battle of the Labyrinth.
Mhm.
I can reread Battle of the Labyrinth, and I did a lot when I was younger.
Yeah.
Like that was the one that I had the most memories of. It was one that I would just like pull out and be like, nice, I'm like eating my
Yeah.
pizza and reading Battle of the Labyrinth.
I think it's the
And
most
the Last
fun.
Olympian, it's the most fun,
Yeah.
while also having good stuff.
Mhm.
Last Olympian is one of these things where it's like, it's the last book in the series and it's much more serious and it's,
Mhm.
I would say, a better book,
Yep.
but I don't know what, like, does that make it the one that I like the most?
Well, that's the thing where I actually think 3 is my favorite, but I see the arguments for why 4 and 5 are better than it. To me, this ranking is about which is the best book, and I think that 5 is the best book.
I think
think so
you're
too.
right. In terms of achievement of skill we've had criticisms of every single book, but I think this one pulls it off the
Yeah.
best. So
I cannot wait to see where the next book lands on the list because I have no idea what Olga will think. It's going to be an adjustment because it's not Percy, and that will be interesting, and I can't wait. I've already started reading it, so I literally can't wait. But any other thoughts, Clara? Are you excited for Lost Hero?
You know I am, and you know why I am.
Yes, I do.
I am
My
so in
time
the
has
dark.
All right. All that being said, thank you guys so much for listening. Please rate us, review us, leave comments, email us, all that jazz. And may the gods be ever in your favor.